Today, let's do something that's a little bit taboo. Let's talk money. This is something that I've been wanting to do on the How to Be an Author podcast for a while. I'm actually planning an episode on whether you should and how to quit your job to be a full-time writer. And I've spoken about this at length on my various TikTok videos and on my website. But today, let's talk money when it comes to how much does it cost to publish a book. A lot of writers, no matter where they are in the process, they all of a sudden completely freeze up the minute you talk about money or paying anything or how much money is involved in this whole publishing game. And when I started talking about the cost of publishing and printing a book, I had writers reacting really strongly. In fact, writers were a little bit triggered, and it caused a lot of them to retreat into this attitude of, oh, I'm just writing for myself. I don't even know if I want to publish my book, really. Oh, I don't plan on making any money from my book. Okay, but I don't believe you. Many of you maybe are doing this for yourselves, but haven't you dreamed just once of actually making money from this thing that you love to do? After all, why are you spending so much time on an activity that is going to make you zero money? Now, money is never guaranteed when you're writing, just like it's not guaranteed you're going to sell your art or you're going to sell your music. But come on, that's always a little part of the dream. I think that it's something that the minute you start considering going pro, you start to think about, okay, what is my balance sheet on this? How much money am I spending on this so-called hobby or this new professional pursuit of mine, or this professional pursuit that I've been working on for a long time without seeing real results? There comes a time when we all think about that and we think about how much we've spent or how much we're about to spend or how much we're capable of spending and how much we're capable of making. I think it's something that any smart writer really should take a look at. And when I talk about ripping off the Band-Aid, that's because this episode might be a little bit uncomfortable, but I think that one of the huge problems that really negatively impacts writers in their ability to finish and publish their book, I always say this, that it's mindset, but part of that mindset is not having informed themselves on the money realities of it. And then they end up making these decisions or jumping to conclusions without any information to back that up. And that's never a good thing to do. So I started engaging a lot of writers on publishing books, writing books. Why aren't you writing your book? I said, why aren't you finishing your book? And the excuse that so many writers or would-be writers would give me was, oh, well, it costs too much to publish a book. I can't afford it. And once I started engaging with writers about this, especially on TikTok and things like that, I realized that many writers have completely incorrect assumptions about how much it actually does cost to do this publishing thing. And it doesn't help that there are so many businesses online that are looking to make a quick buck from you and other writers. And they're trying to do that to help you to do something that honestly you could really do yourself, or you could have someone do it for you for free. So today we're going to be talking about how to see which way you're going to publish and how it's going to cost you in those two different options of self-publishing or conventional publishing, because writers often base their decisions of how to publish on the cost, and that makes little to no sense. We've talked about conventional versus self-publishing on the podcast before, and if you missed that episode, you'll want to circle back and listen to it, because I think people make incorrect assumptions about what each of these publishing options is like. And you need to realize that rather than trying to make that decision from a cost standpoint, well, in any case, from a standpoint of how much is going to cost you to publish that way, I think you should look at it in terms of what's the right choice for my book and my career. So that is a really important thing to think about. And you're going to want to realize that there are scams out there, and we're going to be touching on that in this week's episode. But then in next week's episode, it's going to be all about the scams out there that are out to get authors like you. And so that's going to be a really good thing to listen to. So if you're not subscribed yet, you should definitely subscribe to this podcast so that you won't miss that episode when it comes into your mailbox. If you're a writer dreaming of becoming a successful author, join me, writing coach Karena Akhavein, on the How to Be an Author podcast, your weekly source for writing information, inspiration, and motivation. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me on the How to Be an Author podcast. This is a really, really important episode today because I think that half the problems that authors run into are because they just don't know the answers to certain of these questions, like how much does it cost to do this, or how much is this service? Is it needed as I go to publish my book? And I'm not saying that you don't know it because you're dumb, because that's not the case. The problem is, and this again is something we're going to be going into in next week's episode more in detail, but the problem is that so many scammers and scammy companies preying on writers are so good at having so much information out there that it's really hard for you to get the correct answer to these so-called simple questions. So when you're looking things up online, there's a huge glut of information, and I don't blame you for having a hard time sifting through all of it to see what's the truth. So that's why I'm going to be talking to you about the real costs of publishing, whether it's self-publishing or publishing conventionally, in today's episode. Also, I just want to mention that in my upcoming course, From Idea to Published in 6 months, we're going to be going step by step on how to publish and how not to be wasting money or getting scammed on that road to publication. So that can be super worth it to you. It's going to save you so much time and money in the long run. So definitely get on the list to be the first to find out when that course comes out. It's going to be soon, and I'm really excited about it. Okay, so I mentioned in the introduction how many authors actually base their decision of whether to self-publish or publish conventionally on the idea of cost. So what they tell me is, oh, I can't afford to publish myself, therefore I'm going to publish conventionally because the publishing house is going to pay for it all. Well, okay. Let's rewind a little bit. First of all, I'm glad that you realize that the publishing house is going to pay for things and that you're not going to pay, because some authors get scammed. Again, next week, there's going to be more about that. But some authors think that they need to pay for a publisher or an agent, and that is not true. So any company that's telling you that they're going to help you to publish your book and that it's not a conventional publisher per se, any company that's asking you for money to publish, they're probably asking you for money to do things that you really could do yourself. And so you do have a choice as to how much you're going to spend on various services as you self-publish. So to rewind, conventional publishing, zero upfront publishing costs. Same goes for getting an agent, all of that stuff. If they ask you for money, you run. But self-publishing, you're going to have to pay for things like editing, formatting, book cover, publishing and printing, and marketing. So think about all of those things and how much that's going to cost. We're going to run it down because you've got a variety of ways of doing this. Many authors decide that it's a better use of their time and energy to pay someone to do certain things for them, whereas others are total DIYers where they're going to be doing many of these things themselves. And sometimes I think that that's the best course of action. And sometimes I think that paying a professional goes a long way. And I get it. We're not rolling in dough. None of us are. So you don't want to overpay for services that you can barely afford in the first place if you're not getting a lot out of it. So I'm going to be talking about, what's worth paying for and why, and what you don't need to pay for, and then those things that you might choose to pay for and why. So many authors have told me when I've talked about the costs of self-publishing, they get really defensive when I say, well, you can do it for free. because they say, well, you're going to have a poor quality book. Okay, maybe, because, it's hard for us to be motivated to work really hard on creating something that's so perfect while we're working in a vacuum. It's hard for us to be objective about the quality of the book we're putting out when we haven't hired professionals to help us with it. I get that. But for some writers, maybe it's the right thing to produce a few books that are not perfect quality, but just to get the experience and just to start getting the readership. And then later on, you'll feel more comfortable paying to do those services, knowing that you'll probably get a return on investment. So, speaking of return on investment, this is a big issue with writing. I had some writers tell me when I suggested that maybe you could have some friends do some writing services in exchange for other things like other services or products that you could provide them with. And someone was telling me, well, your friends should support your book by buying it, and you should support those friends who are, editors or artists or whatever by paying them for their services or promising them to pay them once the money starts rolling in from your book. Well, that's where I say I'd much rather, as someone who has provided services on exchange in the past when I was an interior designer or even with editing, where I actually traded my services for things like Botox or things like a piece of furniture or a painting. I've done that and I was really happy with it because that contract was clear up front. I feel like both of us got a lot of value out of it. Many times a service costs a person less to actually do. And then if they're getting something in exchange that they would have paid for anyway, like yoga classes or personal training, it all comes out in the end. I think it makes a lot of sense. So I'll run us through a few examples of how to do that, how to brainstorm that. But in terms of the money rolling in and you reimbursing professionals, once that happens, don't bet on your book making money. I have ways of talking you through optimizing the chances of making money. But really, if you're not doing everything right, and even if you are doing everything right, the money is not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed in any kind of business. You can launch a product and have it bomb, and the same thing can happen with a book. And in fact, there are a lot more moving pieces that actually can make that happen. Psychologically, I think that we have a hard time marketing ourselves in the first place. And so if you're not marketing your book relentlessly, and believe me, I am guilty of doing this myself, you are not going to be selling as many copies of that book as you had dreamed. And there's no way you're going to be paying some kind of a professional back. So I have some clients, especially some young clients who are really impressive people who have decided that they are taking this course, that they're investing in their books. They're investing in great cover designers. They're investing in great editors and writing coaches, hence why they're my clients. And they're investing in paying for ads for marketing those books and paying to build an author platform, like a great website, a great lead magnet. And these people are maybe not going to capture back that investment with book one or even book two. But as I was telling one of my young clients the other day, within a few years, she's going to be so far ahead of the people who didn't invest at all in their writing career. But then again, the self-published people who did it all themselves and have been practicing and have been improving steadily started out with maybe a first book that was kind of crappy. And now they've got more books out there because they can afford to do that because they're not shelling out so much money for it. Those people are also going to be way ahead of the game. You know who won't be way ahead of the game? That's the writer who's been paralyzed by these false ideas of how much it costs to do certain things and by the lack of desire to spend any kind of money. So let's be realistic. When we make money in our other jobs, when we make money in whatever we do, yes, we're paying for living expenses. Yes, we're paying for fun stuff. And I feel that people do that without hesitating. Yet when it comes to investing in something that's important to them, like their writing career, like producing something that they want to share with the world, that's when people start hesitating and start hemming and hawing, nickel and diming, where they don't want to spend any money for a high quality service that's going to make their book actually do that much better. At the end of the day, it's a calculation. It's how much you're willing to invest in this, but also knowing that eventually it may pay off in wonderful ways. So no guarantees here, but definitely think about it in terms of an investment. Let's talk again about this idea of exchanges for services, because before I'm going to talk about how much it costs to edit, how much it costs to format, how much it costs for a book cover, how much publishing and printing cost, how much for an agent, a publisher, marketing, all of this cost. Let's talk about how we can potentially pay for these things. So I talked about working and saving money. This sounds so obvious, but really, you set aside a fund for vacation. Why don't you set aside a fund for your book? I know it's scary, but honestly, your book is as enjoyable as a vacation in the long run. It's a product that's going to stick around and keep paying off for you if you let it. So I think that saving for, being able to pay for these services that are going to make your book all the better, that's crucial. I also think that just looking at what your expenses are, do an audit of how much you spend on useless things. Do you go to Starbucks? Okay, how happy does it make you that you go to Starbucks? Is it crucial that you have that Starbucks coffee for $5? Or can you make a wonderful coffee at home and then carry it around and it's just as delicious and it costs you a fraction of the price? So think about that. If you mindlessly are doing food deliveries, think about how much you can save. Just do the math. Like within a few weeks, you can have saved enough to pay for a professional to do things like your book cover or like copy editing. You've got some bigger ticket items. We're going to be talking again about all of those costs, but seriously saving a little bit. Or how about taking on a side hustle? Doing dog walking or dog sitting or teaching yoga classes. I have clients who've done all of these things, even babysitting, even cleaning houses. There is no shame in the game when it comes to saving money to do the thing that really matters to you. So I really recommend taking a cold, hard look at your finances and at what is possible and at what your real priorities are, because I think you'll find that there is more wiggle room than you had thought. I have a lot of writers that I talk to who are like, oh, I really want some writing coaching. I really want this. I really want that. And they're like, but I need to save up. And I'm like, you need to save up for about a week. Really, technically, anybody, even on minimum wage, could get an hour of coaching by saving for a week. And I know that some people are on a much tighter budget. And that's why I really try to provide a huge amount of value. But guess what? If you can't afford the writing coaching, what are you doing now? You're listening to a podcast that was completely free. So you have ways of getting this information. Sometimes it just takes more work, more looking, more digging, and you're going to get the stuff that you need. So that's a really crucial thing. I don't force anyone at all in my whole community. I don't force you to pay for the podcast, for blog entries, or for writing group right now, though we are going to be going to a subscription model just because, again, my time is worth something. Your time is worth something. How can we provide value and how can I do something that's fair both to me and to the writers that I serve? And that's the way you should be thinking about it too. How can you be fair to yourself in terms of the time you're spending versus what could you just pay for it and be able to move on and do more creative things or do more of the fun things or spend time with your family while you pay somebody to actually do your book cover instead of you agonizing over it and ending up with something subpar. Very, very important. Now let's talk again about this idea of exchange for services. I love the exchange community. There are whole communities of people offering services on exchange or for goods. So just to brainstorm, okay, let's say you have a friend who's an editor and maybe they're starting out, but they're pretty good. And, they've got a schedule that's reasonably open and they can probably take you on. And you can't afford how much it costs to have an editor. I get it. That's a pretty high price item. But what if your friend is willing to have you cook for them for a month, or they're willing to have you talk them up and just really promote them as much as possible and babysit their dog for a few days? I mean, there are ways that you can make this work. You can, whatever your skills are, like look at what kind of marketable skill you have that you can be using to offer trades to people without them getting offended or without it not being interesting for them. And remember, It's fair for anyone to refuse a trade. So don't get mad at your friends because they're supposedly not supporting your writing career. They're also professionals. So don't expect someone to do this, but sometimes it happens. I have clients who've been gifted editing, for example, as a wedding gift. I'm like, how cool is that? I have people who've been gifted a book cover by friends who are trying to develop their portfolio as book cover designers. All of these things are things that you just need to keep your eyes and ears open for. So that's really important. Okay, so now let's get down to the nitty gritty. So this decision of whether to self-publish or publish conventionally, let me just tell you that both of those things can cost you $0. But there's some places where it might be worth putting some money down. So let's go and start with the editing cost. So by the way, when I say that publishing conventionally is always zero, that's actually kind of not true, because oftentimes if you want to be competitive when you are querying agents so that you can get an agent to help you to get your book published conventionally, they're the liaison between you and the publishing house. Oftentimes you're going to have so many more chances of snagging an agent if your book is already professionally edited. That's the sort of thing that's going to prevent any barriers to getting inspired by your book. If an agent starts reading and they see that your story isn't fully developed and that you've got spelling and grammar errors, they're not going to waste too much time on your book. So having a professionally edited book is probably the best thing that you can do. Also, oftentimes you'll have an agent who will say, okay, I'm intrigued by this book. I would like you to return it to me once you've had it edited or once you've redeveloped the story because it's got potential, but right now it's not working. Some agents will say that to you. Now, I'm just going to give you a little caveat because this will be more fully developed in next week's episode about the scams. But some agents who are not exactly honest might say, oh, I've got a list of editors for you. Why don't you use one of my editors? In which case they might be a scammer because they're skimming off of that or taking a share. But many reputable agents will say, come back to me once you've edited your book. So you're going to be spending to edit anyway, whether you're publishing conventionally or not. So this is a really fair investment. If you're self-publishing, I would say that hiring a professional editor is one of the best investments that you can make, especially if you have a developmental editor to start, because I know that so many authors have told me, well, I don't need an editor. I can catch all the mistakes and I have Grammarly and I have spell check and, I've got a good eye. Okay, I've said this a million times. I'll say it again because it can never be said too many times. We don't catch all the errors in our book. Our mind skips over them. It skips over spelling mistakes. Let me tell you, the most surefire way to start seeing all the spelling mistakes is to publish your book. That's when you start realizing what you've done. But also when it comes to the story, we miss things. We fill in the blanks. We don't scene set adequately. We repeat ourselves. I was just self-editing after the second pass with beta readers. I was just self-editing my latest work in progress. And I realized that I had the timeline completely out of order for one of my secondary characters. And I was like, what am I doing? Why did I not notice this? That's just how the human brain works. So there are ways to cut down on your editing costs, but I think that hiring a developmental editor or a writing coach is probably a great idea. One thing that I do for a lot of my clients is that I'll say, listen, if you can't afford to have me look at your whole entire document, because let's be realistic, that's going to be usually around, depending on the length, probably $2,000 to $3,000, just developmental. And then we have the copy editing. But if you want me to tell you whether your story is balanced and everything else, I'll usually ask for an outline as written and a couple sample chapters. That helps me to see if there are any possible problems with the pacing, with the way you're writing, with the way your story is being developed. From your outline, I'll be able to see if you've got some characters who are not needed, or whether you've got some storylines that peter out, or whether the causality is strong enough, or whether things are happening and the stakes are high enough. All of that is crucial, and that's something that a good editor can probably figure out pretty easily. And you won't figure that out pretty easily. So I would say that I would definitely look at setting aside about $3,000 to $4,000 to $5,000 for editing. That sounds like a huge amount of money, but when you think that your book's going to be that much better and maybe you'll make it back, that could be worth it. However, okay, let's say that you think to yourself, are you nuts, writing coach Karena? What is wrong with you? $3,000 to $5,000. There's no way I have that. I can never have that money to justify that cost of editing. Okay, how do we get around it? You can do the self-editing. And on my website, I have a self-editing checklist that you can feel free to download. It's going to help you so much to look at things objectively, also putting your manuscript aside for at least a month and looking at it with fresh eyes, printing it out, double spaced, and going at it with a red pen, and also showing it to multiple beta readers. All of these are methods that are going to help you to self-edit your book in a way that won't be quite what a professional editor would do, but at least it's going to start getting you a little bit better off. Another good idea is to ask your beta readers specific questions. Tell one, hey, I would like to look at the character arc. Can you really focus on that? Tell another one, I want to know if the pacing works. Things like that are going to help you to kind of curate your own editing experience, and that's really going to help. So think about that. Now let's talk about formatting. I have so many writers tell me, oh my God, the formatting's so complicated. And this is something, of course, that happens when you're self-publishing, not when you're conventionally publishing. But Amazon and Apple Books are asking for very specific formatting for your book. There are things like the chapters and the page breaks and the alignment and all of that stuff. And so some writers get conned into paying for formatting. Now, I would say that if you're a complete Luddite who hates word processing programs with a passion and feels incapable to create a margin or to edit a whole doc for formatting, and that you're hopelessly lost, can you ask someone before you pay for that service? Because honestly, I feel that that's one of the cons. You can format your book yourself. Google that stuff and you will figure out how to do it. Is there frustration and time involved? Of course there is. But how frustrated did you get and how much time did you spend publishing or writing your book? It's just worth it in the end to spend that time on it, I think. So formatting, I would say never pay for that. Just Google it or have someone help you, but you definitely do not need to pay for it. Now, how much for a book cover? Your book cover is so crucial. This is one of the first things that people see that give them the impression of your book. I mean, first impressions count, and a book cover is key. I'm going to be having future episodes about what makes a good book cover, what makes a bad book cover. But I think that a good book cover is so crucial because it tells your reader what to expect from your book. It sets you into a type of genre or packs you in with other books that have similar covers, similar feels. It helps your book to stand out, but it also just is really attractive, like an attractive book cover that makes a reader think, hey, this looks pretty professional. This looks great. That's important because that's the problem with an amateur book cover. It doesn't look professional. So the minute your reader sees that when they're looking at the thumbnail on Amazon or wherever they're looking at it, they're going to think to themselves, wow, this book's probably not well written because the cover's so bad. And I've seen some authors just positively shoot themselves in the foot with a really cheapo cover. I was covering an author on my podcast that I had previously who did such a great job with her story, and she was doing everything right with the marketing. And she's a really nice lady. I mean, just everything was so great, but her cover looked like something that she'd done in Microsoft Paint. I mean, not even Photoshop. So you really have to be realistic about your capabilities. And even when you have your kid or your friend who's like, oh, I'm a graphic designer, I can make your cover. Well, a book cover, it's not just any kind of graphic design, it's a book cover. It's really specific. It does specific things. So if you've got somebody who's not specifically a book cover designer, they might not grasp what it needs to do. And again, we'll be talking about this a little bit more in a future episode. But for now, just know that probably spending for a book cover is money well spent. And usually I would say that, some people charge like $500 to $800. That sounds huge. But at the same time, this is something that you'll be seeing and displaying and using for a long time to come. But you can go a little cheaper on this. You can go on these sites where people bid on the work. You can go to Fiverr. You can go to places where people are working on volume, and you might get something that's just fine. I would say that what I wouldn't do is some of these plug and play covers where they have these pre-made covers that people are selling, and then you plug in your title. And honestly, I just think those are so bad. Everybody's cover looks the same. People are using clip art, and you've seen the same image time and time again. And I just can't. I can't do it. If you really must do your own cover and you're very good at graphic design and you're willing to learn a little bit what goes into a good cover, I do have a TikTok video out. If you just search for writing coach and then you look writing coach plus, book cover or something, that video pops up pretty easily. And I'll kind of show you my step-to-step of how I make a book cover. Now, I don't think this is the end-all be-all book cover. I don't think it's the best ever, but it's a way to do it for cheaper. So consider that. Now, how much for publishing and printing? This is something where authors are like, oh my God, I can't afford to publish my book. It costs a fortune. Well, it doesn't, because the one thing that you need maybe is an ISBN number. And that is $129 or something for one. But if you buy 10 of them, it's like $295. Okay, again, that is you working and scrimping for a week, maybe a month. And then you can get those ISBNs. Why is it worth it getting an ISBN versus self-publishing without one, which you can absolutely do, by the way. You can do it on Amazon or Apple Books without one. It's just that having the ISBN makes your book more searchable. It enables you to be part of Ingram Spark, which means you can choose to have your book possibly distributed in bookstores. And also, even putting your book in that local bookstore or your local library, you're going to want an ISBN number. So you need that. So I would say that this is one thing where scrimping and saving and not wanting to spend that money up front for the ISBN number, that's shooting yourself in the foot. That is penny wise, pound stupid, because you need an ISBN. So there's a possibility, and I've thought about this and I don't really know how it would work, especially how you store it or whatever, but you could go in on 10 ISBNs with friends. And then that would work out to like $29 per ISBN. But you really need to make sure that these are good friends who are going to give you access to those ISBNs, because one person is the primary and then you need to use the other ones. So discuss how that's going to work with your friends. I don't want to carry any responsibility for that, but that's just an idea on how to save on the ISBN. But otherwise, actually uploading your book onto Amazon or onto Apple Books, that costs you $0. So don't tell me that publishing costs a lot, because it does not. And even when it comes to printing, you can do print on demand. Print on demand works just fine. You can do print on demand through Amazon again. And I hate putting all my eggs in one basket with Amazon, for sure. I agree. However, okay, it's easy. Call me lazy. It works. You can also do these different small print on demand runs with certain companies, including BookBaby, and there are a few other ones that are associated with Ingram. And all of these are not bad. But again, you're putting money up front. You're ending up with cases of books that you might not get rid of. I would just as soon rather say, let's do the print on demand for now and then see where it goes. So consider that, because often there are setup costs involved with the print on demand, small run stuff. So the other Amazon version of print on demand, that doesn't happen. I would just say go with that. Okay, we mentioned this a little bit at the beginning of the episode. How much for an agent and a publisher or a publisher? $0. Some of these hybrid publishing houses are going to say that you're paying them to publish your book, and they're going to help you because they're going to do all this marketing stuff for you, etc., etc. This is really where the scams come in. So this is where I want you to tune in next week, because marketing scams for writers are the biggest scams. But let's talk marketing for a second before next week, so you don't have to wait for that. How much is marketing for your book? Yeah, that's the other reason that lots of writers say they want to go and do conventional publishing, because marketing costs so much, blah, 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 and they do it for you. Okay, I hate to break it to you, but many conventional publishers don't do that much marketing for their smaller writers. And also, in exchange for that, they're taking away a huge amount of your royalties. So if your biggest concern is getting the most royalties for your book, well, publishing conventionally is not the way to do it. Self-publishing is. You're going to get more of the percentage from each book sale if you're self-publishing, because your publisher is not marketing your book for free. They are definitely making you pay for it, and you don't even really know what you get. You have no say in it. So I would say if you're going to put your dollars into marketing, be in control. And I know too many writers who hate marketing so much that they would do anything to avoid it, which is why they get scammed, because they're paying someone to do things that they should do themselves. You are fully capable of running an advertising campaign for your book. You're fully capable of putting yourself out there on social media, which, by the way, that's free. You're fully capable of calling up people who have podcasts that feature authors and asking to be a guest on their podcast. This is something that some of these so-called publishers or writer service websites are going to charge you an arm and a leg for. And you don't even know if they're targeted when they do that. You know, if you want to be at a book event, some of these companies are going to charge you like $15,000 to be book signing at a book event. And that's wild because those are not your reader in general. So if you're doing your marketing yourself, I say try to invest a little bit, try to pay for some paid ads, but at least be really careful of where you put those dollars. I think it's a good thing when you're nickel and diming a little bit here because you're not going to get scammed. You're not going to pay for something that's not going to pay off. And I think that's really smart. So if I were just starting out and I didn't have much money to spend on marketing, what I would do is that I would definitely build a website. I would definitely have something like MailChimp or something to be gathering email addresses. So I had an email mailing list because that is your cheapest or freest way of actually reaching a lot of potential readers. And then I would just keep posting things on social media, have dedicated accounts for my book or for my author persona that I have. And then I would keep pushing that as much as possible because the problem is many of us stop pushing because we feel embarrassed that we're self-promoting all the time. If we just keep going, we actually get as much of an effect as if we were paying for something. And then, yes, I think that paying for really targeted online ads can be a definite great investment for you. Maybe another thing you can do is pay for a virtual assistant to be posting things for you on a schedule, to be developing a Pinterest strategy for you so that you're more visible, to be coming up with fun ways for you to promote yourself and then creating all of that content, doing the SEO for you. All of these are things that are worth spending a little bit of money on because probably there's going to be a payoff. Now let's talk about some of these other pros out there that are charging money for writers. You've got writing coaches and editors like me. You've got book cover designers, ghostwriters, and more. Many of these people charge fair prices for services that you may decide you need. You may decide you don't need them. It's a choice. Many of these people are not scammers. Many of these people make a living and they care about their writers. They care about everything they do. But you do need to do your homework. You do need to ask for feedback. You do need to talk to people and really trust your gut when it comes to whether these people are actually going to be doing the things for you that they claim they're going to be doing for you. So for me, for example, when you talk to me, when you have your 15-minute call with me, my goal is to deliver value for free in 15 minutes so that you can see how much value you'll get out of working with a writing coach. Editors can do the same thing, for example. They can say, hey, I'll do a sample edit, but some editors are so busy, I'll charge like $50 for a sample edit of a couple pages just because I can't afford to keep working for free. But at least you're not in for a fortune. You get to see if it's going to suit you. Book cover designers, they need to send you some samples of what they've done. Ghostwriters, same thing. They need to tell you who's on their client list. Not all of them, of course, because many ghostwriters actually have to sign these agreements that bind them to secrecy when it comes to who their clients are. But still, you get a gut idea of whether these professionals are who they say they are, whether their prices seem to be kind of on par with the other services that you've seen out there that are similar. So be a little bit smart about how you choose your professionals and what you choose to pay for. Make sure that you're not just being cheap or reactive when it comes to refusing to pay for a certain thing, because in the end, writing a book and publishing a book, these things that you pay for are an investment into your future. And once you've paid for it, I highly recommend that you realize how much you paid. Get the value for your money. You've paid to edit your book. You've paid for a kick-ass cover. Now, do yourself a favor, do yourself a service, and make sure that you actually market it so that you can get your book seen now that you've put so much into it. I hope this episode really helped you to see what the real costs are of publishing, things that are worth paying for and things that are not worth paying for, so that you can enter this whole thing with eyes wide open and not be scared of what it's going to cost you, not be in denial, and make some really smart decisions when it comes to your writing and publishing career. If you have any pressing writing-related questions or would like to be featured on the How to Be an Author podcast, please feel free to reach out on my website, creativeandwritingcoach.com.